Hi guys, how are you doing? Hope you guys are having a great afternoon in this very cold weather. My name is Belinda Malachi, and I'll be presenting today's life science revision session. Okay, so welcome. Just please note, I'm going to switch off my webcam so that you guys can be able to hear me properly. If I keep it on, we might have some connectivity issues. So in order to prevent that from happening, I might need to switch off my webcam. So please take note of that. Also, if you see me disappearing now, don't be alarmed. It's just so I can improve my connectivity. Okay, so before we start, if you are struggling to hear me, please make sure your audio is on and your speaker volume is turned up. Okay, if you still cannot hear me, please try leaving and rejoining the session again. Please also take note that you are muted when joining this session. So if you've got any question, please use the question box. You are encouraged and advised to ask questions where you do not understand. Please ask questions, okay? Don't leave it or think it's a stupid question. It is not, okay? Any question is a good question. Again, you can download this presentation from the handout section to use later. Also, if you have a pen or pencil close by, because some of the stuff I might want you guys to write down. Some stuff I might I'm going to add on the slide, and I might ask you to write them down. So please have a paper and pen handy. Okay. Remember to send questions on the question box. If you did not get your comments or irrelevant comments, please ask questions that are relevant to today's content. All right. Visit Impact's website for recordings on the session as well as previous sessions at www.schooling past class videos. Okay, so you can access them there. Okay. Okay. So today we'll be looking at term 1 revision. Okay, so we'll be going back to term 1. We have finished the work for term 2. So we'll be going back doing term 1 revision. I'm just going to touch on the important parts of term 1, and then from there we will give you a timetable where we're going to be looking at revision for both term 1 and term 2's work. But for now, we're going to go back to term 1, and we're going to be looking at biodiversity and classification of microorganisms. We're going to be looking at biodiversity and classification of plants, and we're going to be looking at biodiversity and classification of animals. All these topics were done in term 1, so we're going to be looking at that today. We're going to be focusing on the important parts of the right? So I'm just going to give it a few and for everyone to get their and to get okay, I apologize for that. My audio was turned off. Can you guys hear me now? Please, can you just raise your hands if you can hear me, you guys? Please just put up your hands if you can hear me now. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. So I'm just going to allow 1 more minute for everyone to get settled. Okay. While I wait, for those who are here, those who have written your Term 1 test, please can you share with me on the question box? Remember, nobody's gonna see but me. Please share on me on your question box your experiences with the Term 1 test. What topics were you unable to answer? What did you find the most challenging in your question paper, and so forth? Can you please share with me on the question box what your experiences were with the first paper? Did you do well? Did you feel like you could have done better? I know you guys had to write it in the middle of a lockdown, and everything just happened so quickly. Some of you needed to write it in the middle of a lockdown. Some of you were unprepared. But how was it? How was the first test? What topics were challenging, or what topics were asked in a challenging manner, in a manner that you guys couldn't get at all? Share it on the question box. Okay. And how are you finding grade 11 life sciences so far? It's the nicest name. It's the nicest. Anyways, we gonna start now. Okay, 5 kingdom classification. So we know that living organisms can be classified into various kingdoms based on their observable features. And we have 5 kingdoms, namely the Plantae kingdom, which have different plant species as well. And then we have kingdom fungi, okay? And we have kingdom Animalia, where me and you and your dogs and your fish and birds and all that are grouped into kingdom Animalia. Then we have kingdom Protista, which has organisms such as amoeba, which is classified as one of the microorganisms that we're going to be looking at. Okay, so that's kingdom Protista. And then we have kingdom Monera, home to, or the kingdom for bacteria, okay, which is one of the microorganisms that we're going to look at first. Okay, so living organisms can be classified into various kingdoms based on their observable features. Okay, they can further be classified into phyla. You're gonna see how animals are classified into different phyla based on their characteristics in this session. They can further be classified into classes, orders, families, genera, and species. Okay, this is known as taxonomy, the grouping of living organisms. All right, so we've got 5 kingdoms: kingdom Plantae, kingdom fungi, Animalia, kingdom Protista, and kingdom Monera. Okay, so as I said, we looked at, in term 1, we looked at biodiversity and classification of microorganisms. So some microorganisms are grouped into different kingdoms. Okay, so we will find bacteria in kingdom Monera. And the bacteria and the fungi are classified into part non-living organisms. Okay, remember the properties of living organisms are Mrs. Gren. Okay, for an organism to be classified as living, it needs to move. The M stands for movement. It needs to respire, respiration. It needs to sense or stimulate, sense external parts of the environment. It needs to grow. Okay. It needs to excrete waste. It needs to nurture or nutrition. It needs to feed. It needs to feed. Nutrition, and it needs to reproduce. Okay, so viruses cannot respire. Actually, the only thing that a virus can do is reproduce, and it cannot even reproduce by itself. It needs a host in order for it to reproduce. So it cannot respire, and it cannot produce, it cannot perform most of these metabolic activities, and because of that, it cannot be classified as living. But it cannot be classified as non-living either, because it does reproduce. Okay, so because it's so difficult to classify a virus, we just leave it like that. Okay, it's got no kingdom, it's got no classification. Okay, let's look at some of the properties of a virus. Okay, viruses cannot reproduce by themselves. They need a host. They need a host in order for them to reproduce. They can only reproduce in a living cell. Okay, viruses cannot respire. Viruses are parasites. And we therefore to them, okay, as and okay, my connection seems to be gone again. Sorry. Can you hear me now? Please raise your hands if you can hear me. Please raise your hands if you can hear me, guys. If you can hear me, please put up your hands so that I know if I can continue, or just type yes in the question box. If you can hear me, please help me before I continue. Okay, thank you. I got a yes, so I'll continue. Just please type in the question box. If you can hear me, please help me, because sometimes I lose connectivity without noticing. So someone just please quickly type in something in the question box so that I'm aware. Okay, thank you. Okay, so back to viruses. Okay, so viruses do not consist of cells, and they are therefore known as acellular. So they are unlike other organisms like us humans. We have cells. Your dogs, your cats, your plants, all living organisms. Actually, all living organisms have cells, because remember, cells are the building blocks of life. There is no life without cells. So viruses do not consist of cells, and this is some of the reasons why it's not classified as a living organism. It's acellular. Okay, so for each microorganism, you need to know the following. Okay, you need to know the structure for each microorganism. So for viruses, protists, bacteria, and fungi, those are your microorganisms. Your viruses, to bacteria, fungi, and protists. These are the 4 microorganisms that you have studied in the first term. The microorganisms that you are going to study in your whole high school career, protists. Okay, so those are the 4 microorganisms that I'm referring to. So for each of these, you need to know their basic structure and their characteristics. By characteristics, I mean, are they acellular, are they unicellular, are they multicellular, what are their shapes, and so forth. So you need to go and study the characteristics and structure of each of the microorganisms. Again, you need to know the role, okay, the roles that these microorganisms play in maintaining balance in the environment. Okay, what important role do they have in maintaining balance in the environment? Okay, also you need to look at diseases, the effect and management of one of the diseases from each group. For example, viruses, they can include HIV. You need to know how HIV is managed. Is it curable? What effect does it have? So most of these things you know from your everyday life. Influenza, flu, some other viruses include rabies. Now we have COVID-19, okay, and then different types of bacteria as well, diseases and how they're managed. You can look at listeriosis, it's part of the bacteria. We have TB, tuberculosis. We have quite a number of bacteria, okay, and then fungi, also diseases that are caused by fungi, like athlete's foot, ringworms, and so forth. So you need to look at their effects and how they are managed. Okay. Also, diseases caused by protists as well. Okay. Malaria, okay, is a disease that's formed by this microorganism, one of the microorganisms. There, you need to know how it's transmitted. What are the symptoms? How can it be prevented? How can it be treated, and so forth? Again, you need to look at immunity. Okay, you need to look at the 2 types of immunity: natural okay, you need to look at passive and active immunity. Okay, I will not be going into immunity today. I'm just going to be summarizing the structures and the roles and the diseases, structures and the roles of the microorganism. So you need to look at the two types of immunities, natural and acquired immunity. Okay. As well as further look into passive and active immunity, the differences and how each take place. Okay, so this is a table that summarizes characteristics as well as the role of microorganisms. So these are the microorganisms that we're going to be looking at: viruses, bacteria, protists, and fungi. Okay, first let's check which kingdom each microorganism belongs to. So we're going to look at the kingdoms first. Just getting my pen quickly. Okay, so we're going to look at the kingdom first. Okay, so this is the kingdom. Viruses do not belong to any kingdom. Okay, viruses do not belong to any kingdom. Remember, they cannot be classified. Bacteria belong to kingdom Monera. Okay, protists, simple and easy to remember because they belong to kingdom Protist. Okay, fungi, also very easy to remember because they belong to kingdom Fungi. Okay, then we're going to also look at the other kingdoms next, but they are not microorganisms, so you won't see them here. So kingdom plant kingdom and animal kingdom are not part of this because they are not microorganisms. These are just microorganisms. Okay, let's look at cells or types of cells that the organisms have. Remember, we said viruses do not contain any cells, so they are acellular. Bacteria are unicellular. They only consist of a single cell. So this is a single-celled organism. Bacteria are single-celled organisms. They are unicellular. Okay. Protists there are some protists that are unicellular and some are multicellular. Okay. Humans are multicellular. Fungi, some are unicellular while some are multicellular. Okay. Microorganisms can also be classified as whether they are prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Okay, remember eukaryotes are cells that have a nucleus. Okay, so eukaryotes are cells that have a nucleus. Prokaryotes are cells that do not have a nucleus. They don't have a true nucleus and they don't have membrane-bound organelles inside of them. Okay, they are the organelles inside the cells do not contain membranes. Okay, so those are prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are organisms that have no nucleus. Eukaryotes have a true nucleus. Okay, so bacteria are the only microorganisms that are prokaryotic. They have no true nucleus. Okay, protists are eukaryotic, meaning they've got a true nucleus. Fungi are eukaryotic because they've got a true nucleus. Remember, inside a cell, both animal and plant cell, or inside any cell that you've learned last year, there is a nucleus which is like the control of the center, and there you're going to find chromosomes that have your genetic information and everything. So this does not have that. It does not have a nucleus. Okay, it has something that looks like a nucleus, but it's not actually a nucleus. Viruses cannot be classified as prokaryotes or eukaryotes because they don't have any cells, so they are acellular. You cannot classify them as eukaryotes or prokaryotes. Okay, how do they reproduce? So this is the reproduction. How do they reproduce? Okay, now I want you to please write this down. Okay. Protists reproduce both asexually and sexually. And sexually, please add that in. They reproduce both asexually and sexually. Okay, fungi represents both asexually and sexually as well. Please write this down. Okay. So protists reproduce both sexually and asexually. So that's fungi. But bacteria reproduces asexually by a process known as binary fission. So asexually means we don't need a male and a female gamete for fertilization to occur. It fertilizes by itself. It reproduces itself. Okay, so bacteria reproduces asexually. Viruses need a host to reproduce. Okay, the role of each microorganism. Viruses are important to maintain population control. As we can see with the COVID-19 now, a lot of people are dying, and I'm not taking pleasure in this, but this is found relevant biologically speaking. It is found relevant because it is maintaining the population. It's creating a space within our population. Okay, although it's sad because we are losing our loved ones and everything, but it is important. It is an important biological ordeal. Okay, so viruses help in maintaining population control. And then bacteria helps in a couple of things, nitrogen fixing, so that we can be able to get nitrogen. Remember, we cannot absorb nitrogen from the atmosphere. Okay, it needs to be fixed into something, and then we get that. So bacteria helps in nitrogen fixing, and it also acts as a decomposer. Okay, so that's the role of bacteria in maintaining balance. Okay, protists create oxygen through what we call photosynthesis, because some algae, a type of a protist, photosynthesizes. So you know, with photosynthesis helps in maintaining carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Remember, carbon dioxide is used up from the atmosphere. So protists help with that. They create oxygen while reducing carbon dioxide from the air. Fungi act as a decomposing agent. Okay. So that's a summary of the microorganisms that you learned from term 1. I obviously didn't put the structures there. You know that there's different structures for bacteria. It can be in a spiral format, it can be in a spherical format, it can be cylindrical shape. There's a lot of shapes of bacteria. So please just go and revise the structures of bacteria. They are examinable. There is a structure from each microorganism that can be examined. So please just go and look at that. Okay, this is a typical question that can be asked from viruses or from microorganisms. Okay, question number 1 asks, name parts A and B. Okay, label. We are given 2 types of viruses here, virus 1 and virus 2. This is some virus that infects bacteria. This is the influenza virus. Okay. Before you answer questions, don't be quick. Don't be quick to answer questions. Read the question first and read all the information that's provided to you before you even attempt to answer the question. Okay. Sometimes if you read the answer, the question quickly, you might answer it wrong, and it will cost you marks. So you'll get it wrong, not because you didn't know the answer, but because you didn't answer what was being asked. So take time to read the question. Okay, so we are given 2 types of viruses here. And in this virus, we are given labels A and B. Okay, question 2.1.1 asks, name the parts labeled A and B. Okay, so I'm just going to give a few seconds to somebody who knows the answer. Do you guys know the answer to this? Do you know what A is and what B is? If you do, just going to give you a few seconds to attempt it. In the question box, do you know what the part labeled A and B is? Okay, let's continue. A is the protein code or capsid, and B is the nucleic acid. Okay, remember a virus contains a nucleic acid, either DNA or RNA. Okay, so B represents that nucleic acid. Okay, state why viruses are described as acellular. Why are they called acellular? What is an acellular organism? Can you try and answer that question for me? Why are viruses described as acellular? In the question box. Why are viruses described as acellular? Okay. Someone says they are not living. Okay, that's fine. I can give it to you. But the more appropriate question would be they do not consist of cells. But they are not living is also not wrong. It's not wrong. Okay. Okay, so please attempt some of these questions by yourself. For the sake of time, we will move on to the next slide, and maybe if we still have a bit of time, we'll come back and answer all these questions. Okay, this is another type of question that can be asked on microorganisms. They've given you a case study here on listeriosis outbreak in South Africa that happened between 2017 and 2018. Obviously, here you are required to read the extract and then answer the questions from it. Okay, some of the questions can be answered by looking at the extract. Some might be theoretical questions that you already know, that you have already studied. Okay. Next, we're gonna look at kingdom Plantae, or the plant kingdom. Okay, so this is a phylogenetic diagram that describes the evolution of plants. It's called a phylogenetic tree, and sometimes you can be asked questions based on a phylogenetic tree. Okay, so this is a phylogenetic tree that shows the evolution of plants. Okay, in the beginning, plants lived in water. They were only found in water, and the ancestor of all plants is the green algae. Okay, it was found in water. Okay, in order to move to land, plants needed to solve a couple of questions. A couple of problems. For example, in the beginning, plants could only reproduce inside water. Hence why you will find them inside water or in moist places, because they can only reproduce there. So in order for them to be able to survive on land, they needed to first of all develop a vascular system. Okay, a vascular system that will be able to help transport water around their bodies. Okay, they also needed to be able to reproduce, find methods of reproducing without using water. Okay, but all that was conquered, hence why we have plants in our backyard now vascular systems developed at the end, and plants were able to live on land. Okay, but the ancestor of all plants are green algae. Okay, and then we have Pteridophytes, which is the most primitive plant. Okay, an example of a pteridophyte is a moss. Okay, I'll show you a picture of a moss now. A moss, this is a common example of a pteridophyte. The pteridophyte is the only plant in the plant kingdom that has no vascular tissue. It's got no vascular tissue. This means it cannot grow tall. It's very, very, very short because it's got no vascular tissue. Okay, and this is found in moist places also. Okay, so pteridophytes are found in moist places. We're going to look at the properties just now, summarize them into a table also. Okay, and then as time went by, plants developed a vascular tissue. Okay, vascular tissue plants can further be classified as whether they've got seeds or no seeds. Okay, the next plant to evolve was the Pteridophyte. A typical example of a Pteridophyte is a fern. I know this is very common. Some of us have it in our gardens. This is an example of a Pteridophyte. Pteridophyte was the first plant after Pteridophytes to develop a vascular tissue. Okay, this had no vascular tissue. This was the first to develop a vascular tissue. Okay, although they have a vascular tissue, Pteridophytes have no seeds. They have no seeds. This means they use spores. They use spores in reproduction. Okay, these are the first vascular plants. Okay, from there, plants develop seeds, but they were classified into whether they've got flowers or not. So some were enclosed inside flowers. Some of the seeds were naked. Okay, we know this as gymnosperms. Okay, naked seeds. Okay, so although plants evolved to have seeds, some of them were enclosed inside flowers, some of them were not enclosed inside flowers. The ones enclosed inside flowers were called or are called angiosperms. Okay, angio means enclosed. Okay, so that's our phylogenetic tree. Now let's quickly look at the properties. This is an example of a moss. This is a moss plant. It's got no vascular tissue. As you can see, it's very short. Okay. For each plant, you need to know the following. You need to know the structure of the dominant generation. You need to know whether it's got a vascular tissue or not. You need to know how each plant type reproduces. And further, you need to look at the seeds. Okay, we have seen that some of the plants in the plant kingdom have seeds, the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. You need to look at the importance of seeds and seed banks as well. Okay, remember to please ask questions as we go. Please ask questions as we go. If you are not understanding something. Okay, let's look at a table with summarized properties of each type of plant. We started with a pyrophyte. Okay, the structure of the dominant generation. The dominant generation of a pyrophyte is known as a gametophyte, and the dominant generation of a pteridophyte is the sporophyte generation. Okay, and then the dominant generation of a gymnosperm is the sporophyte generation. Dominant generation of an angiosperm is the sporophyte. So The Bryophyte is the only plant type with the gametophyte as the dominant generation. Okay, structure, it's a thallus. It's got the Bryophyte has no true leaves. Thallus means it's got no true leaves, no true stems, no true roots. It's got leaf-like structures and root-like structures, but not true leaves and roots. Okay. Pteridophytes have true leaves, roots, and stems. Gymnosperms have a taproot system. Angiosperms have roots, stems, leaves, as well as flowers. Okay. Vascular tissue, Bryophyte, absent. No, remember this was one of the primitive plants. It's got no vascular tissue. Okay. From there, Pteridophytes evolved, which developed a vascular tissue, and from there, all the other plants developed a vascular tissue. Okay. Seeds or spores, Bryophytes contains no seeds. They only contain spores. Pteridophytes contain spores. Remember, gymnosperms were the first plants to develop seeds, okay, but they still have spores. Angiosperms have spores and seeds. Okay, fruit, none, none, none. This was the first plant type to develop a fruit, okay, the angiosperm. Water needed for reproduction. For the Bryophyte, yes, Bryophyte needs water to reproduce. Pteridophytes need water to reproduce. So this means you can only find them in moist areas. Gymnosperms don't need water to reproduce. Angiosperms do not need water to reproduce. Okay, this is a typical question that you can get on the plant kingdom. Okay, let's look at what it's asking. Indicate whether each of the descriptions in column 1 applies to A only, B only, both A and B, or none of the items in column 2. Indicate whether each of the descriptions in column 1, these descriptions, apply to only A or only B or both of them. So we want to check, does this description apply for this only or this only, or does it apply for both of them? Okay, this is what's required. And then the question says, write A only, B only, both A and B, or none next to the question number. Please follow instructions, you guys. This means you are only required to write 1.3.1 and either write A only if the answer here is A only, B only if the answer is B only, or only A and B. Don't write the whole thing. Okay, otherwise they're gonna mark it wrong. So you only write the question number and write either A only, B only, or A and B. Let's look at the first question. Contains vascular tissue. Okay, so we need to check. Is it A only that contains the vascular tissue? Or is it B only that contains the vascular tissue? Or is it both A and B? Okay, can you attempt that? Is it A only? Is it B only? Or is it A and B? Okay, contains vascular tissue. Is it A only, B only, or is it both of them? Do both of them consist or contain a vascular tissue? Okay, remember mosses. We learned that mosses do not contain a vascular tissue. So the answer is B only. Right, well done, you guys. Okay, present in the moss plant. Does it have A, an underground stem, or B, a thick cuticle? So obviously you will be able to answer this if you have properly studied the structure of a moss plant. Does it have a thick cuticle, or does it have both an underground system and thick cuticle, or does it have none? Okay, a moss has none. It has none of this. Okay, so you were going to write 1.3.2 and write none. Right. So Let's look at 1.3.4 quickly. Produces seeds. Is it A only, B only, A and B, or none? Can you answer that question 1.3.4 for me? Produces seeds. Is it A only, B only, both, or none? It's both A and B. Both A and B produce seeds. Okay. Right. Okay. This is another typical question of the plant kingdom. Okay. As I've said, if we've got enough time, we will come back and answer all these questions. Okay, this is a typical essay question on the animal kingdom. Describe the distinguishing characteristics of Pteridophytes and angiosperms, respectively, showing developmental trends. Also discuss the biological importance of protists and explain the role of invertebrates in the ecosystem. Okay, so remember how to answer a question, essay question. You have to unpack it bit by bit. Find subtopics. First, you are required to describe the distinguishing characteristics of Pteridophytes and angiosperms. Okay, you need to describe those. Respectively means you need to start with Pteridophytes first, and then you'll describe angiosperms. Showing the developmental trends. How did they, like the developmental trends? We know that this had no vascular tissue. It's got it, and then as evolution took place, angiosperms are one of those plants that had a vascular tissue. Okay. Also discuss the biological importance of protists. This is from microorganisms. Okay, if you can remember, protists, some protists photosynthesize. So some protists photosynthesize, and they can help in giving off oxygen and reducing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But there's a whole lot that protists can do. You can go find that in the textbook. And then again, you're asked to explain the role of invertebrates in the ecosystem. Okay, so this is a nice essay question because it's got a lot of subtopics. So you've got a lot to play around with. Okay, animal kingdom. Lastly, and then we are done. Okay, let's look at the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom can be divided into groups, into two groups. Can be either classified as a vertebrate or an invertebrate. A vertebrate contains some spinal cord. Invertebrates do not contain a spinal cord at all. Okay, it can further be divided into phyla according to observed features. Okay, we've learned in the first slides that organisms can be classified into phyla as well. Okay, so phyla is just a form of classification. So animals can be classified into phyla depending on their their characteristics. Okay, so we have about 6 phyla that you need to learn in grade 11. The first one is Porifera. That's the first phyla. We have an example of an animal from this phyla is a sponge. Okay, this is an example of an animal from this phyla. Next one is Cnidaria. Okay, and an example of an animal from this phyla is starfish. Okay, and then We have Lathelominthes. Okay, that's the next phyla, and an example of an animal from this phyla is a tapeworm or roundworms or whatever. And then we have Annelida, an example of an animal from this phyla. Phylum is, sorry, that's a M, phylum, not phylum. Phylum. An example of an animal from arthropoda is the spider. And then we have chordata. An example from that is fish, mammals, humans, horses. So we are found in this. We are found in this phylum over here. Okay, it seems like I didn't include an example. One example here. Okay, the Annelida. An example would be an earthworm. Okay. Okay, let's look at the properties of animals that are found in this. Okay, we will look at how they are classified according to their symmetry. Remember, a symmetry is a line that cuts something into equal parts, into two equal parts. So animals are classified as whether they've got a bilateral symmetry or a radial symmetry or an asymmetry. We're going to look at what that is. So a line of symmetry divides something into two equal parts. Okay, for example, this circle, not a proper circle, has one line of symmetry. Okay, that divides it into two equal parts. So this means if you were to separate these two, you're going to have two similar things on one side, and it's got another line of symmetry there, and it's got another line of symmetry there, and it's got another line of symmetry there. Okay, so if you draw those lines at those parts in the circle, you will get two equal parts. Okay, so one line of symmetry is known as a bilateral symmetry. Okay, divides something into two equal parts, only two equal parts. For example, as humans, we are bilateral. We only have one line of symmetry. We only have one line of symmetry, and that's right in the middle. Okay. Radial symmetry is more than one line of symmetry. Okay, asymmetry means there is no line of symmetry at all. Okay, so Porifera has no line of symmetry. This means this sponge cannot be divided into two equal parts. It's asymmetrical. Okay, animals can also be classified according to how many tissue layers they've got. Porifera has only one tissue layer. Okay, remember, we have tissue. All our organs are lined with tissue. So this animals are lined with only one type of tissue. Okay, animals can either be classified as whether, can be classified as whether they've got a coelom or not. Porifera are acoelomates. They do not have a coelom. Okay, animals can be classified as whether they've got a through gut or not. Okay, so a Porifera has no through gut. It's got no through gut. We're going to look at the disadvantages of of having a through gut and not having a, of having a through gut and not having a through gut, if we still have time. Okay. Animals can be classified as whether they've got a skeleton or not, and we also look at the type of skeleton that that animal has. Okay. So Porifera is asymmetrical. It's got no line of symmetry. It's got only one tissue. It is acoelomate. It's got no through gut, and it's got no skeleton. It's an invertebrate. Cnidaria has a radial symmetry. So this is the only animal phyla with a radial symmetry. Porifera is the only one with an asymmetry. So this makes it easy for you to remember. All the other phylas are bilateral. Okay, so Porifera is asymmetrical, Cnidaria is radial, all the other phyla are bilateral. Okay, let's look at the tissue layers. This has two layers. This is also known as diploblastic. Okay, this has three layers known as triploblastic. Porifera has one tissue layer, Cnidaria has two tissue layers. All the other ones have three tissue layers, so it makes it easy for you to remember. Okay, the first three phyla are coelomates, and the rest are coelomates. There is a coelom present. Okay, please go and learn in your textbooks the three layers that they are talking about. Okay, the exoderm, the endoderm, and the mesoderm. The coelomate is a lining that's found in the mesoderm. Please go and learn the three layers that they are talking about in your textbook. Okay. Through gut. The last three phyla all have a through gut present. This means their digestive, they've got a mouth as well as an anus. Okay, food is ingested through one hole and digested through another hole. Okay, so this is what they mean by through gut. Okay, this has no gut at all. This have one gut, so this means that food can only be ingested. Okay, so here we've got two openings, here we've got one opening, here we have no openings at all. Okay, the first three phyla are invertebrates, they've got no skeleton at all. Okay, then Annelida has a hydroskeleton. Remember the type of skeletons that you learned in grade 10. Arthropoda has an exoskeleton. Okay, and Chordata has an endoskeleton. Like us, our skeleton is internal, and crabs and other examples have an exoskeleton. Okay, let's look at typical questions that can be asked. Okay, so complete the following table showing different animal groups and their features. Write down only the number of the questions and the answer. So here they've given you the name of or the example of that animal. They want you to tell us from which phyla this animal is from, and they give you the characteristics of the animal. It's got no asymmetry. It's got one tissue layer. It's got no through gut. Okay, so an example is a sponge. From which phylum is this animal? Do you guys know? From which phylum is that animal? Is the sponge? Okay, if you've got the answer. The first one, Porifera. Okay, first one, Porifera. Okay, now they've told you the phylum, Cnidaria. An example is a jellyfish. type of symmetry, radial. They want to know how many tissue layers this phylum, animals from this phylum have. Okay, we know that for Cnidaria, we have 2 tissue layers. Okay, let's look at this question quickly. That says, state one disadvantage of having a blind gut in the organism. Okay. An example would be that ingested food will mix with, undigested food will mix with digested food. Okay, so they're all mixed together. There is no system. Remember, you've learned that in the digestive system, it's a systematic process where we start with ingestion and then digestion, and then undigested food is ingested outside. So here there is no order. Everything just mixes up together. Okay, so that's one of the disadvantages of having a blind gut. Whereas with a through gut, undigested food and digested food will never mix together. Okay, there is order. Everything is done systematically with a through gut. Okay, blind gut, everything just happens without any order. Okay, so I can see that the time is up. I hope you guys can take this notes together with your textbooks, go and revise these topics and attempt your tests again, okay, and see how much you get this time. If you didn't get to ask your questions, please send an email to academics@impact.co.za and I'll give you feedback, okay, with regards to anything that we spoke about today, and I will be sure to give you feedback. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day. Remember to stay safe.